What is the role of a surgeon in cancer management? As we all know, surgeon in cancer care focuses to diagnose, stage, and treat cancer by surgery, especially in solid tumors. Surgeons may also perform palliative surgeries to help control pain, increase a patient's comfort level, and manage cancer-related symptoms and side effects. Uh, so, like, what makes excellent surgeons excellent? Is it quality or quantity based, or is it volume or subspecialization? To answer these questions, we have many articles which I'm going to. Um, when I had, when I was looking for this particular topic, like I found out that in this particular, like, the surgeon as a prognostic factor is a extremely difficult thing to study, because there are no actual randomized control trials comparing different surgeons, and from an ethical point of view, it's almost impossible to perform a RCT between different surgeons. There are only observations studies which have compared, either most of them are retrospective, and the quality of surgery is directly dependent on the quantity, more specifically on the number of operations performed at a given hospital, as well as the designated surgeon. This is a bar diagram which is taken from New England of Journal of Medicine, published in 2003 by J.D. Buckmeyer et al. It's a bar diagram which is showing surgeon volume. Here we can see it's a surgery for the lung cancer, the less than 7 to 17, and more than 17 per year, and the mortality rate according to them. And for the different surgery, we can see that surgeon volume has better mortality rate. And coming to the important part, the volume outcome relationship in cancer surgery. In the field of surgical practice, much attention has been paid to the relation between case volume and the outcome. Measures of surgical quality, such as surgeon volumes, have the potential to help patients select the best provider. Surgeon volume is inversely associated with perioperative adverse events and oncological outcomes. This is an article which is published in 2010 in Annals of Surgical Oncology. Sorry, about trends in hospital and surgeon volume and operative mortality for cancer surgery. Where the analysis of patients who received one of the 6 cancer resection in Florida, New Jersey, and New York for 3 time periods, 1988 to 91, 92 to 96, and 97 to 2000 was done. And descriptive statistics and nested regression models were used to test for the changes in the association between inpatient mortality and annual hospital and annual surgeon volume over time, adjusting for hospital and patient and hospital characteristics. The results, like, unadjusted inpatient mortality rates for the 6 cancer resection declined between 0.8 and 4 percentage points between the time periods 88 and 97 to 2000. Over this time period, annual hospital and surgeon volumes for the 6 cancer operations increased an average of 24.3 and 24.2% respectively. Simulations suggest that increase in hospital and surgeon procedure volume over the time led to a reduction in the inpatient mortality ranging from 0.1 percentage point for rectal cancer to 2.3 percentage points for pneumonectomy. The conclusion of this particular study was persistence of the volume outcome relation and increasing hospital and surgeon volume explain much of the decline over time in inpatient mortality for 5 of the 6 cancer operations studied. Concentrating the cancer resection among the high volume providers should lead to further reduced inpatient mortality. This is another systematic review which is published in 2016 about the relationship between a surgeon volume and outcomes, a systematic review of the systematic reviews. The data was taken and up to 2015, and the results was that 32 reviews supporting on 15 surgical procedures conditions were included. It was not just cancer surgery, other surgeries were also taken into consideration in this particular article. Most reviews tend to support the presence of a surgeon volume outcome relationship. This is most clear cut in colorectal cancer, bariatric surgery, and breast cancer, where reviews of high quality show large effects. When taking into account its limitation, this overview can serve as an information basis for decision makers. And this particular study result seemed to support a positive volume outcome relationship for most procedure and conditions. This is a paper which was published to find out whether a surgeon can be a prognostic factor in colorectal cancer. It was a systematic review to assess whether there is an evidence that the surgeon is a prognostic factor in the treatment of colorectal cancer. Data source Medline 1985 to February 1999. The articles were retrieved, and publication which analyzed the outcome of patients with colorectal cancer and in which none of the variable was analyzed was a surgeon. The results of this particular study, 13 studies were identified which address the outcome measures: post-operative mortality, anastomotic leak rate, local recurrence rate, and long-term survival. For these outcomes, different surgeons achieve significantly different results, with experienced and specialist surgeons achieving significantly better results than the other surgeons. The conclusion of this particular study was that that surgeon is an important prognostic factor in the treatment of the colorectal cancer. This is a slide where I've taken from the chapter of this colorectal disease in 2018 by the Association of the Coloproctology and Great Britain and Ireland. This is about the surgeon as a prognostic factor in colon and rectal cancer. In this particular chapter, they discuss about three important things: volume and caseload, specialist training, and educational programs. About the volume and caseload, where a study was based on the data of 2,706 patients from 2 randomized and colorectal cancer trials, and a concurrent registration study found patients operated on by a low volume surgeon at a low volume hospital have the worst outcomes, and the impacts of eye surgeon and eye hospital annual caseloads were independent. And a Cochrane review was performed in 2012, which attempted to generate a higher level of evidence, where they showed that presence of a volume outcome relationship in the colorectal cancer surgery based on the hospital and cancer surgeon, hospital and the surgeon caseload and specialization. About the educational programs, the study showed that there was an improvement in the quality of specimens following this implementation of CME and laparoscopic assisted surgery for colon cancer, and specifically following a refocusing exercise demonstrating the importance of continued educational efforts. This is another paper about the pancreaticoduodenectomy, which was published in JAMA Oncology in 2010 to study the effect of hospital volume, surgeon experience, and the surgeon volume on patient outcomes after pancreaticoduodenectomy. Methods: patient morbidity and mortality, quality of dissection, and learning curve were examined according to hospital volume in 3 periods, in 2 periods: period 1 1980 to 2003 versus period 2 2004 and 2007. Surgeon experience, that is the total number of pancreaticoduodenectomies, and surgeon volume, that is number of pancreaticoduodenectomies per year, was assessed. Results of this particular study: perioperative morbidity and mortality for all 1,003 pancreaticoduodenectomies were 41% and 3% respectively. Differences existed between period 1 and period 2 in percentage of PDs performed in elderly patients, that is 7% versus 17%. Period 2 had more in elderly patients, and mortality was less compared to period 1, that is 2%, and estimated blood was again less compared to period 1, that is 1,817 ml versus 780 ml. Length of stay decreased from 18 days to 12 days, and proportion of international study group and pancreatic fistula grade C was less, that is 12% in the period 2 group compared to period 1, that is 29%. Surgeon with less experience, that is less than 50 pancreaticoduodenectomies performed PD with higher morbidity, that is 53% versus 39%, and fistula rate was 10% compared to 20% in the period 1, and blood loss was less, that is 1,100 compared to 1,918, and operative time for 58 minutes versus 335 minutes compared with the surgeons of the more experience. This particular paragraph is comparing the low volumes, less experienced surgeon with the high experienced surgeon. And learning curves projected that less experienced surgeons would achieve morbidity and mortality rates equivalent to those of experienced surgeons when they reach 20 and 60 pancreaticoduodenectomies respectively. And the conclusion of this particular study: improvement in the pancreaticoduodenectomy outcomes, including mortality, occurred PD volume at a pancreatic center, surgeon experience remained an important determinant of overall morbidity. Experienced surgeons, however, had comparable outcomes irrespective of annual volume. A learning curve in pancreatic surgery has recently been hypothesized and modeled, suggesting that after 60 pancreatic duodenectomies, surgeons improve the perioperative outcomes of estimated blood loss, operative type, length of hospital stay, and margin status in patients undergoing pancreatic duodenectomy for periampullary adenocarcinoma. This is another study which was published in 2010, a systematic review and meta-analysis of the volume outcome relationship in the surgical treatment of breast cancer to find out are breast cancer patients better with a high volume provider. Again, it was a systematic search. It was done, and the result of this particular study, where the 12 studies of good methodological quality was included for the meta-analysis. The results showed a significant association between high volume providers and an improved survival. The association is the most robust for surgeon volume. The conclusion of this particular study was the results show that survival after breast cancer surgery is significantly associated with the high volume providers. This particular article is taken from American Urological Association, where it published in 2003. It was about variation among the individual surgeons in the rate of positive surgical margins in post radical prostatectomy specimens. It was seen where a total of 4,629 men were treated with radical prostatectomy by one of 44 surgeons at two large urban centers between 1983 and 2002 for clinical stage T1, T3, NX M0 prostate cancer. And various factors were studied. Among them, surgeon and volume of case per surgeon was another factor. In the result, for the 26 surgeons who each treated more than 10 patients in the study, the rate of positive surgical margin was 10% to 48%. On multivariable analysis, higher serum PSA, extracapsular extension level, higher radical prostatectomy, Gleason sum, surgery date, surgical volume, and surgeon were associated with surgical margin status after controlling for all other clinical and pathological variables. And the conclusion of this particular study were that while the clinical and pathological features of cancer are associated with the risk of positive margin in radical prostatectomy specimens, the technique used by individual surgeon is also a factor. The low rate of positive surgical margins for high volume surgeons suggests that experience and careful attention to the surgical details adjusted for the characteristics of the cancer being treated can decrease the positive surgical margin rates and improve cancer control with radical prostatectomy. This particular paper where the effect of volume on esophageal cancer resection, what constitutes an acceptable resection volume for center of excellence. During this particular trial, when it was published, that there was no consensus exist that what constitutes an high volume center. To determine this, a retrospective analysis was performed on patient undergoing esophageal resection for cancer the 2000 between 1998 to and 2005. The result of this particular study was that a total of 4,080 patients underwent esophageal resection, and the median annual hospital resection volume was 4. The mortality rate of high volume center ranged from 9.94%, that is where they consider more than 2 resections per year, to 1.56%, where more than 30 resections per year. The best model was with the annual hospital resection volume greater than or equal to 50. In this, the conclusion of this particular study was that they did not find any support to say that the use of volume cutoffs for defining center of excellence for esophageal cancer resection. Although volume for as an increment impact on the mortality, volume alone is insufficient for defining the center of excellence. Volume seems to be function as an imperfect surrogate for other variables, which may be better defined center of excellence. Additional work is needed to. This was about apart from the volume of surgeon, like is there any other factors to identify for the center of excellence for the esophageal surgery? And this particular article, which was published in Journal of Clinical Oncology in 2013, to find out about this esophageal cancer surgery, the hospital and surgeon volume in relation to survival after this esophageal surgery. It was a nationwide Swedish population-based cohort study of 1,335 patients with esophageal cancer who underwent resection in 1987 to 2005, with follow-up for survival until February 2011. And the association between the annual hospital volume, annual surgeon volume, and cumulative surgeon volume and risk of mortality rate were calculated. And the result were that there were no independent association between the annual hospital volume and overall survival, and hospital volume was not associated with short-term mortality after adjustment for hospital clustering effects. A combination of higher annual and cumulative surgeon volume reduced the mortality occurring at least 3 months after surgery. The conclusion of this particular study was that surgeon volume rather than the hospital volume independently influences the prognosis after the esophageal cancer surgery. This is about lung cancer, where patient with a primary diagnosis of non-small cell lung cancer between 2008 and 2014 were identified in a Victorian cancer registry. In that cancer registry, they could identify 3,420 patients of whom had lung cancer surgery. Primary outcome was within 90 days of surgery, and secondary outcomes like overall survival, use of post-operative ventilation, and more than 24 hours spent in ICU was calculated. Results were 57%, that is 1,941 patient of lung cancer patient underwent lobectomy, 38% sublobar resection, and 5% patient underwent pneumonectomy. There was no difference in 90-day mortality and overall survival between low and high volume centers regardless of the procedure. Patients operated in lower volume centers had more admissions to ICU for more than 24 hours stay. And they observed no evidence of any survival difference between lung cancer patients attending low and high volume hospitals for cancer surgery. And high proportion of patients had an ICU admission of more than 24 hours in ICU in the lower level. This particular study showed that there were no difference between low and high volume hospital in lung cancer with respect to lung cancer. This is another population-based study which was which is published in 2010 to find out the surgeon volume and cancer esophagectomy, gastrectomy, and pancreatectomy. The data were collected between April 2000 to March 2010, and mortality as in hospital death within 30 days of surgery was determined. Then statistically determined the minimum surgeon volume that produced a mortality rate insignificantly different from the optimum of the curve. The results of this particular study were total of 16,572 esophagectomies, 12,622 gastrectomies, and 9,116 pancreatectomies were examined. Surgeon volume ranged from 2 to 29 esophagectomies, from 1 to 14 gastrectomies, and 2 to 31 pancreatectomies per surgeon per year. Each additional case of esophagectomy, gastrectomy, and pancreatectomy would reduce the 30-day mortality odds by 3.4%, 7.2%, and 4.1% respectively. However, as surgeon volume increased, mortality rate continued to improve. Therefore, we were unable to recommend minimum surgeon volume. The conclusion of this particular study was that mortality after resection for esophageal, gastric, and pancreatic cancer falls as surgeon volume rises up to 30 cases. Within this range, they could not demonstrate any statistical threshold that could be recommended as a minimum volume target. After going through all this publication about the volume and outcome, surgeon volume and outcome, like there were few studies mentioning about the need for the specialist training and the continued medical education. I would like to stress upon this point. Why surgeon who treat cancer need to specialize or subspecialize? Surgical skills and quality are not only related to volume, but also to specific training and interest in a particular pathology. Surgeon with a specific training in a given specialty have more interest in and make greater use of the full range of diagnostic and treatment options available within a multidisciplinary setting. Specialist training must eventually reduce or prevent extreme variation in surgical outcomes. It can standardize the outcome. Evidence of better outcomes in specialist cancer center, like in a regional cancer center. The effect of the specialist training seems to influence the practice of surgery substantially. For example, lung sparing procedures such as lobectomy and sleeve lobectomy are more commonly performed in specialist units, and the operative mortality is lower in such centers. This was the data taken from this एक Captain Personal Communication in 12th annual meeting, and they also said that quality and outcome are primarily determined by the knowledge, skill, and experience of the surgeon. Facilities for the complex post-operative care of the secondary importance, and how surgeons can keep up with the advances. Continuing education for practicing surgeon is essential. There are a variety of ways which can be provided, including live meetings, continuing medical education, and training activities conducted by live webinars. And another important of this tumor board, telemedicine specialist consultation and virtual tumor boards can bring together the specialists from different countries to discuss complex cancer cases anywhere in the world. A study reported at ASCO 2016 showed that 91% of the participants in the virtual tumor board found it very helpful in managing their patients. 100% felt quality of patient cancer felt was improved, and 100% considered their own confidence improved. And as a national advocating for the quality cancer surgery, professional bodies together with governments in each country need to insist that their citizens receive high quality care. This includes ensuring there are well-trained surgeons, that cancer care is well organized nationally, for instance with regional specialist cancer center, and that relationships are developed internationally with individuals and organizations that can be of assistance. Surgeons working in communities should facilitate sharing of knowledge and support young surgeons working in cancer, encouraging them to engage with leading specialists and networking in the field. And also, I would like to take this opportunity to tell about this surgical oncology as a branch. Who is a surgical oncologist? Surgery alone is no longer a treatment for the most solid malignancies, but a combination of surgery and multimodal therapies like radiotherapy, targeted molecular therapies, and polychemotherapy have become a main role in the management. The surgeon who 40 years ago would often be the only specialist to have contact with the most cancer patients can no longer work in isolation, but must lead a multidisciplinary team. They must be more than just a technician and must understand the biology and the natural history of the disease, as well as a contribution made by the other disciplines to the cancer patient treatment. It is at this point the surgeon becomes a surgical oncologist. Like as we all know, like example, like collaboration with the radiation and the medical oncologist, and the use of neoadjuvant chemo and radiotherapy to enhance the permit surgery possible on the instant for adjuvant therapy after surgery, and collaboration with radiologists to plan surgery or optimize resection margins, and like with pathologists to ensure the appropriate primary and adjuvant therapies, and to quality assure surgery to assessment of circumferential margin in TME. They are the best pathologists, are the one to certify the quality of surgery being done. And collaboration with genetics in the hereditary cancers to optimize treatment, prevention, or screening strategies. Both the US and global curricula define the distinguishing features of a surgical oncologist as an excellent surgeon who can safely manage cancer patients through complex operation, and has a judgment to know which operations to select, knows how to integrate surgical treatment as part of multidisciplinary team, including the type and timing of surgery after preoperative systemic therapies and or radiation therapies, participates as an oncologist in long-term disease management of cancer patients. Take-home message from this is that the individual surgeon is definitely an independent prognostic factor in cancer surgery. The surgeon's learning curve is therefore directly related to the patient's outcome. Improvements in supervision, training, teaching, specialization, the surgeon's caseload and the hospital's caseload will therefore translate into the enhanced patient outcome. The difference between high and low volume hospital outcomes may be a reflection of several factors, either alone or in combination, including the skill and experience of the individual surgeon, better organized post-operative care, intensive care units staffed by the intensivist, and greater resources for dealing with post-operative complications available at high volume hospitals. Even if the skill of the individual surgeon is important, it seems to be even more crucial that the multidisciplinary treatment team develops substantial experience in the management of these patients. Thank you.
You have done a good job with a tough subject. The subject is very wide, and there are no clear-cut definitions available. So within those limitations, you have done a very good job. The topic is open for discussion.
It's interesting. This takes me back to sort of 20 years, 22 years, how surgery has changed. Where when we were students, the branch used to be called general surgery, isn't it?
Yes.
And now look where we are with subspecialization and subspecialization. So how things have evolved, I don't know how things have evolved in India, but how things have evolved in the UK is, there was a report in '95 which talked about volume of work versus outcome in cancer groups in UK. And that is what led to the subspecialization. And when I first came to UK, the list could have been esophagectomy to start with, then aortic aneurysm, and then a thyroid or a breast case or something like that. Whereas those days are gone now, where, I mean, I've de-skilled myself, and it is very interesting when the COVID crisis hit. They were talking about redeployment and everything. So we were reviewing what are our transferable skills we have. And I've not done a laparotomy for nearly 17 years. And I was just thinking, if I am asked to do a laparotomy, how would I fare now? And possibly if I go back and do some laparotomies, it will come back to me. But certainly I feel de-skilled. Whether that's the right thing to do or wrong thing to do, that is, I think, for debate, and whether we can sustain subspecialization for the generation of the MCH students that we're talking about is interesting. The other interesting thing in the UK is that we were supposed to retire at 60. Now it is 65 or 67, and maybe my son's generation, there's no retirement age at all. So how can you sort of box yourself into one tumor group and do 10 operations for the rest of your career for 35 years?
For the trainees, what I've always understood is not just the volume. See, I think yes, very clearly brought it out that it's not the hospital volume, but it's the surgeon's volume which becomes important.
Yes.
And while you are being trained, the density of operations that you actually do, just for the skill. If you do 20 in 2 years, you actually don't learn. If you do 5 in a month, that's when you learn actually. For the learner, that one aspect. And then subspecialty would definitely add to the finesse and the expanse of the operation. The magnitude of surgery becomes much more. See, for example, if you specialize in head and neck surgery, that's when you actually do a craniofacial resection. When I stayed as a surgical oncologist, doing from head to toe, the pressure to do a craniofacial resection was never there, which means these patients were going either untreated surgically or go to this scrap heap of palliative treatment, whether it is radiation therapy or otherwise. So there are certain areas wherein patients don't get addressed at all surgically, only because your volumes of other operations, multiple types of operations that you are doing, you tend to choose what you are good at and then persist with that. So I think specializations are important for the patient. And then when you're doing the same procedure again and again, you will automatically become better and the team becomes better. What I've actually seen and understood in the institute is your ability to tackle problems and complications is much better.
Yes.
When you have a problem and complication, the team understands it, and the next patient at least gets treated much better. And if the next patient, you have done a esophageectomy now, you have done a esophageectomy after 6 months, you would have actually not learned from this. You would have forgotten everything that has happened to you. This is where the volumes actually help, and the ability to salvage a patient becomes better when the volumes are higher, because you learn better, and what you have learned stays with you when you have a higher volume. That is my opinion.
True, Subbu. Rudra, you want to add something?
One should not be with one surgeon only. My point is, to more number of surgeons you get exposed during your tenure, you will learn more tricks actually. as Subbu sir told, some complications are dealt better by different persons. And number two is that if the volume is good in a week, let us say we do 3 whipples in a continuously, the person is going to learn much more than whole month he is doing 4 or 5 whipples at good intervals. So continuously doing one surgery, maybe in a close.
What I feel is rather than discussing whether to learn one technique well, what interval does a surgeon need and all those things, I believe what Dr. Sumohan started is a very valid point. Whether you should learn one technique well, or should you learn a lot of techniques so that in an emergency like the one we are having right now, you would be able to do everything. Whether a super specialization in one particular discipline is good or not. It is obvious that when you learn a technique, quite frequently you do one technique, you will be good at it. There is nothing nothing unusual about it. But whether that is good for the entire society or the fraternity or not, that is probably more important. Can we have opinions on that?
Yeah, true, Manisha. And another point that I want to bring in discussion, would like to hear Subbu and Rudra on it, that more important than the surgeon volume and mortality, there are a lot of other things which could be at risk. Like in a breast surgery being done in general surgery, most of the procedures are MRMs. So if you look at the specialization versus non-specialization, you find more BCS being done in specialization. If you look at the sentinel node biopsies, in specialized centers, sentinel node biopsies are being done. In other, the sentinel node biopsy is not being done. Even though these procedures may not ultimately end up changing the mortality of the patient, but they do change the morbidity. Similarly, what about the loss of marginal mandibular nerve or spinal accessory nerve injury, or in colorectal surgery, the plexus injuries, nerve injuries? So all these things should be taken into account when we are talking of specialization and specialization, because these complications are not going to kill somebody. They are not going to cause a mortality. They are not going to alter the prognosis. But definitely the quality of life of that particular patient will be tremendously altered. Subbu sir.
Once you do better on a patient, then that is the only outcome that you are looking at. What else are we looking at actually? See, what he brought out is, you are being asked to do a procedure you have done for a while. This is a crisis. In the crisis, you don't actually discuss about training in crisis in mind. Although crisis is also very important. It's something that nobody could have actually imagined. It's like a war, and in a war, all the rules change. But otherwise, I think specializations are important because they improve the outcomes of patients, and everything is towards improvement of outcomes of patients. I think they should stay. And then what is also said is, I thought the speaker would relate, surgeon not just as a prognostic factor. You have actually stressed it, but surgery is being discussed as a risk factor now.
Yes.
Is it not?
It is a risk factor, yes.
Factor for poorer survival.
Yes.
Ovarian cancer, for example. Ovarian cancer, in a center where ovarian cancer is treated regularly, or an occasional gynecologist who does this procedure, the prognosis is entirely different. So you become a risk factor, and surgeon is the most important prognostic factor. So, when you are a prognostic factor and can be a risk factor, I think you should learn well. And when do you learn that? When you specialize.
Yes, true. Rudra, we lost you last time, so.
Yeah. So my point was my point was that if you if you have a chance of exposed to the same surgery with different people, then you might learn more tricks actually.
So Rudra's point is that one person should be trained with different surgeons so that he acquires different skills. Agreed. Arnab, you want to contribute something?
Sir, I wanted to say one more thing, sir. In India, there is no, I can say, no benchmark for surgical oncology. Everybody, left, right, and center, is allowed to operate on a surgical oncology case, and even in tier 1 cities, in established centers, there are quality control. There is no quality control in tier 2 cities, tier 3 cities. And sir, even surgical oncology is such a subject that everybody thinks they can handle that.
Yes.
And there is always, I'm not saying anything wrong about anybody else, but other than surgical oncologists, most general like urologists and GI surgeons, they don't have any idea about multidisciplinary management. That means whether it is the chemotherapy and radiotherapy has to be merged, which makes a difference in the survival of the patient. So somewhere we need to, in UK probably Sumohanda will agree with me, there is something that patient can go into a city and see the maps. It is like spot maps, like a surgeon who has done how many cases and what is his outcome and what is his complication rate. We don't have anything like that. You go to the Google and you go to the local maps. So somewhere I feel we have to really think about the quality control of surgical oncologists. Otherwise, it needs to be done.
True. We have to bring in the yardsticks to control the quality. Yes, Mohan.
Yeah, so it's interesting point about outcome. So in UK, the cardiothoracic surgeons, their surgeon level mortality and morbidity is actually published online. In other specialties like colorectal or breast, it is not surgeon level, but it's the hospital outcomes which are published. The other thing I would like to say is we are all concentrating on what surgical skills we have and how we do the operation, but there is a bigger picture here. The bigger picture is how do we keep in top of the knowledge, because now we have a tsunami of knowledge of every single cancer. There's so much publications, so much things going on, so many meetings going on. So if you don't concentrate on one particular cancer site, you won't be able to be on the top of the game in terms of the knowledge wise. And the other thing which is, I don't know how it is like in India, but in UK, we have good data to show that unless we as specialist surgeons participate in contributing in patients into trials, the patients actually have worse outcome. And the only way I can be a principal investigator or anything in a national trial is if I'm in a subspecialist group. Otherwise, I won't be able to concentrate and be able to recruit those patients. So as a part of a subspecialty doctor, one of my big jobs is to identify patients and put them into trials, because that is one of the benchmarks that you can improve patient care by just participating in trials, because that improves the unit's profile, that unit improves the surgeon's understanding of the disease.
True, Sumohan. I fully agree with you that knowledge is a very important factor. Though Keshav has not discussed in his presentation, there are a number of articles which has compared the university teaching hospitals versus non-teaching hospitals. Am I right, Keshav?
Yes.
And all those articles have shown that the survival is better in university teaching hospitals compared to non-teaching hospitals. So now basically, what is the difference between a teaching hospital and a non-teaching hospital? In a teaching hospital, a teacher is forced to keep up his knowledge because he is dealing with the students. He has to teach. The student has to keep asking the questions. And it is very embarrassing if you are not able to answer your student's question. So you are forced to update your knowledge on a day-to-day basis. So there are a lot of data which is available which shows that teaching hospitals do better than the non-teaching hospitals.
What can confabulate surgeons' volumes is when your volumes go up. For example, BHU, your hospital, you have a lot of numbers, so automatically you have a big team. So the team itself, the last slide says, it is a team that becomes much more important than individuals. Surgical.
Yes.
So once you have large volumes, you would always have a larger team. So which can actually become a major factor also. It's not the surgeon's individual volumes alone. And then I would have expected Keshav to also look into a publication wherein they have analyzed depending on the number of publications. See, when the publications in a university hospital have gone up, just the publications, the morbidity and mortality has come down of a procedure.
Yes.
So academic work, what you said, see, once you are being scrutinized, you perform better. So once you have students, once you have colleagues who are actually looking up to you, scrutinizing you, they automatically regulate you and make you do better.
That's true.
Than an individual surgeon who's in his own world completely. So you self-scrutinize yourself, and there are others to scrutinize you. You actually perform better, and the outcomes actually improve. So the number of publications were directly proportional to the improvement in morbidity and mortality.
True. Absolutely true.
Because the basis of this is that is a lot of surgical audit is happening. So whatever work you are doing, your junior is auditing you, and because by virtue of your publications, your peer review and everything, you are getting yourself audited to the world. So that will make all your, as Subbu sir told, is not inside in his own world. He is exposing himself to the world. So everything, whatever he is missing, will be picked up by others, and in the ultimate process, your patient care and the outcomes benefit actually.
True. Very true.
The other point is that all institutes should make it a point that for a month, 2 months, they should send their residents to different other institutes, so that the pattern of work, maybe that there is a specific pattern of work in a particular institute, when you send it to somewhere else, maybe that something else he will pick up. And some areas, like you say, maybe that pediatric oncosurgery may not be so good at one place, and the other place might be having a pediatric oncosurgery unit. Similarly, like a limb salvage surgery, if this limb salvage surgery is there at some other unit, the person might pick up. So, because this has happened to us practically, when we moved to different institutes, we picked up something else from some other places.
True. That's very true. Very true. Yeah, please. iPhone. I don't know the name.
Yeah, hello. I'm Dr. Pankaj Pandey from Fortis.
Yeah, Pankaj. Yeah, Pankaj.
Yeah. Thanks for sending the link. So I wanted to add that apart from having a high volume center, the advantage of a high volume center is not only for the surgeon. I think the anesthetists become better, the staff, the operative staff becomes better, the technicians become better, and the post-operative care for the patient becomes better. At times they would pick up certain things which probably we not miss, but maybe we just overlook. So I think it's an overall development for the department as such. The ward sisters, if you have a dedicated GI department, the staff would be much better as compared to a general, if you ship the patient to a general ward. So I think it's overall teamwork apart from just the surgeon becoming better. Just surgeon becoming better may not, you may do a very good job, and then while just shifting the patient, the drain might get pulled out, and the patient might have bleeding. So what I just want to add, I just want to say that it's overall team which improves, apart from the surgeon, if you have a high volume center.
True. Agreed.
Manoj sir, I have one more comment to.
Yeah,
this,
Arnab.
right? Do you think that the surgical oncology curriculum has to be uniform in India in all the centers? Because there is a lot of problem between the national board and the MCI, and I think we have to now think there is a standardization. There should be a standardization. Even Subbu sir and Rudra sir.
Yes, even my university has a different curriculum than others. So, like if you look at my university's curriculum, my university pays at least 25% is the basic sciences and the allied sciences, and only 50% comes from the site specific, and 25% is recent advances. So even if you look at the teaching and our curriculum, 25% basic sciences, 25% recent advances, and only 50% is site specific. So if you look at the curriculums at different places, you will find different curriculums. As a part of IASO, when I was the secretary, we had tried to form a curriculum. It was formed also, and this curriculum, I think Dr. Gopinath was the chairman of that curriculum committee at that particular time. And this was sent to MCI also. But somehow neither the MCI took interest into that curriculum, nor this curriculum was implemented in any other place. Because in that curriculum, we had emphasized that rotation has to be done in all the subjects. We had emphasized that there are certain sub-specializations which require a student to stay longer period than some surgeries which he picks up in a month or even a 2 months time period.
Yes.
There are some surgeries which he take about 6 months to pick up. These are more complex surgeries like pancreatic surgeries, the esophageal surgeries, the complex resections of the joints, the bone tumors, where he requires to spend a little bit more time. But unfortunately, what has happened is that most of these units have a uniform pattern of 3 monthly rotation into subspecialties, and then there is a problem. Like, you join as a first year MCH today, and you are posted in a pancreas unit for 3 months, and you are never going to have a pancreas position placement again. So you are new to these specialties. You have straight away been sent to pancreas. 3 months you spend in pancreas doing nothing, drawing blood samples. And at the end of the day, when you come out, you know nothing about pancreas. So we also has to emphasize that as a first year, where he should go, as a second year, where he should go, as a third year, where he should go. Because as you spend more and more time in surgical oncology, your comprehension of the subject, your comprehension of complexities keeps on increasing. So probably a first year in a head and neck may do, in a breast unit may do, but in a esophageal unit, if you tell him, he won't be knowing even the thoracotomy instrument names. So what is he going to do over there? So it is something like we have to say that it is everything is not so simple. It is from a very simple procedure to a very complex procedure. I always say that even a lymph node biopsy done by a surgical oncologist is a very complex procedure, because it has to be taken out with an intact capsule, which most of the general surgeons won't be knowing.
On this count, I think national board, there is some uniformity, at least on paper.
Yes, there is.
At least on paper, although the implementation is always dependent on the institution. But at least there is some proof. They have some concept.
Yes, national board gives you much more freedom than the MCI.
Correct.
Most of the institutions are sending their student out also for 1 month or 2 months to get exposure to the procedures which they don't do. So this is quite common in national board, but with the MCI, it is very, very difficult to
one small comment
Yeah, Rudra.
is that when you finish your MCH, you should focus on which subject because now it is a gamut of super specialty. So you have to now choice. You have to have a choice of organ specific site, and after your complete MCH, you should focus on the organ specific site to have more detailed knowledge about that site, and that will help you in developing the organ specific site as your branch where you want to super specialize.
So, Rudra, do you think that with super specialization, we surgical oncologists are regressing rather than moving forward?
No.
Great-
You will. I don't agree. I don't agree that
No,
we
no.
will regress.
No.
What I feel is that if after 3 years, let us say we do 2 years, somebody interested in head and neck is doing microvascular, somebody is interested in breast is going for oncoplastic specializing. I think ultimately your specific area of work will increase. It is not going to nothing wrong in that. But if you want to develop the surgical oncology in a tier 2 or tier 3 city, it may be a different thing. But if it is a tier 1 or a metro, then you have to be site specific ultimately.
Because you are compelled to be site specific, Rudra.
Yeah, correct.
If you look at the surgical oncologist of time, Subramanieshwar sir would talk about Vijay Kumar. Me and you will talk about D.D. Patel.
Yeah.
They are complete surgeons. They could do justice to each and every surgery.
We don't disagree, but till we became like Subbu sir will now not do a breast. He is completely laparoscopy.
But that is his choice. That is his choice.
No.
He chose it.
There is a difference between choice and evolution. So surgical oncology has evolved to a different platform. So if you see the Jagdish, he will be only doing robotic. So it is a evolution process of evolution. How far you want to go in the evolution ladder, it is your own with your own interest. That is the point actually.
I agree, Rudra sir, but we need to, what Manoj sir is saying, I also somehow agree with him. In India, how many people can afford to be site specific only? Because we have got a lot of patients in tier 2, tier 3 cities. The people like me in army, by force, I have to operate a head and neck, and the next day my list is breast or pancreas, and the next is esophagus. I have no other choice. I feel tier 2, tier 3 cities, other than super specialty center like TMH or maybe some other centers who are really center of excellence, they have got different units. How many centers have got different units like a breast unit or in India? I feel scenario is a bit different.
It's a bit different, and basically, that's what my teacher used to say, and Rudra's teacher. I'm emphasizing your teachers also, because they were same, and they used to say in oncology, only the anatomy changes, the operative procedure remains the same. Axillary dissection, inguinal dissection, retroperitoneal dissection.
Dr. D.D. Patel statement actually.
Yeah. So he used to say, if you can do a neck dissection, what is changing in a neck dissection versus axillary dissection? Instead of a jugular, you have an axillary vein. If you go to groin, you have a femoral vein. If you go to abdomen, you have aorta and IVC. So only anatomy is changing. But what you are doing a lymphadenectomy. So how does it matter where you do a lymphadenectomy? So Mohan want to add.
Any comments, Subbu sir?
So Mohan has a comment here.
I think it's a good discussion. Learning definitely is by extrapolation. Is it not? From neck dissection, you learn an axillary dissection. From axillary dissection, you learn a joint dissection. Learning is by extrapolation. So learning has to be a pyramid. You have to be a general surgical oncologist for some good significant time to be a site-specific oncologist. Site-specific oncologist. So that's what we have done. See, I've done head and neck surgery for over 20 years. Now I have a 7-member head and neck team. So I've actually stepped aside. I didn't step out. I've stepped aside, and I allow them to do. I have 3 breast surgeons and various other surgeons. Once, the moment I have confidence on a particular group of surgeons, I'm stepping aside. So I'm not out of it, but I'm not completely into it. So this can happen in a tier. So I don't think we need to stress so much about sub-specialization and whatever super specialization. And most, as Dr. Arnav has actually best, tier 2, tier 3, and then institutions like Army and other places demand a complete surgical oncologist till now. The training has to be pan-oncology. Complete surgical oncologists have to be trained, and it is the time and the situation that would demand them to become better in a particular thing and then stay there.
Yeah, they can choose.
Broad specialty, and training has to be given to make somebody a complete surgical oncologist.
Yes. So Mohan, please.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I remember as a registrar, my skills of doing axillary dissection improved after I did a 6-month stint in vascular surgery. So there's a lot of transferable skills. But the other important thing to think about is that in the end, we have to serve the society that we live in, and what is the expectation is. So the expectation in a place like UK or even the metros in India is that if you have a particular cancer, you go to a specialist who is doing bulk work and is known for that. So if you send a person and say, okay, I'll send you to a surgeon who is doing colorectal but will do your breast operation, the patient immediately will say, here, no, I want to be seen by a specialist breast surgeon. So it's what the society expects as well is important. And also, if you can imagine, surgeons still, we are precious commodities in terms of, if you look at the world, there is 2 million doctors short. If you look at India, how many doctors per population? So you have to use your scarce resources, especially you've done their MS and that level. They can still play a valuable role in cancer treatment in the tier 2, tier 3 cities. So we shouldn't forget that they have to play an important role. A generalist still has an important role to play in some parts of the country.
True, Suman. Manisha, you want to add something on it?
I have been again following it. Am I audible?
Yeah.
Yeah, I have been following the discussion again with a lot of interest. I am trying to agree with you and Dr. Rudra at the same time. What he says is it is a natural process of evolution for a surgeon to super specialize or subspecialize, whatever you call it. You learn skills, you know what you are good at, and then you finally choose to become a subspecialist or choose to do whatever you are being good at. But when you come to training a trainee, a MCH student, he or she has to first be exposed to all the subspecialties to be able to decide. He or she has to be having skills that would allow him to go and work in a tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, any situation that he's put into. That is what he needs to learn first. Then he can go on choosing a site for himself, a place to work for himself, a unit to work for himself. That is a natural process of evolution for any surgeon, not even an oncologist, for any surgeon also. First, you are good in what you are doing, whether it's an axillary dissection or a neck dissection, you know how to dissect first. So that is what we probably need to teach our candidates who join a surgical oncology program, whether it's a DNB or an MCH or maybe some training. Unfortunately, we don't have such kind of things in our country. It might be different outside. I, for one, I have traveled all over the country learning skills from a lot of surgeons. I learned more from bad surgeons than from good surgeons. But that's an individual effort. There was no scheduled program that would allow me to do that. So I believe the need of the hour is to have a
We all agree that we have to have an oncologist first before he becomes a super specialist.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that if we super specialize, then the place we work has to have a load of, a good volume of those patients, and that would be available in big cities. So basically, a surgeon, a super specialist like MCH course and all should initially be trained in all the branches, and later on maybe one can sub-specialize. Because after MCH, suppose he goes to work to his, it would be difficult.
So if we don't have any other questions, I'll thank everyone to participate. It was a lovely discussion, a topic where everybody holds a different opinion, but there is a clear-cut need for a specialization. This was felt, and this is what has given rise to development of surgical oncology as a super specialty. It has been a big effort. Subbu sir will be knowing that a lot of great people have put in a lot of great effort to develop this and getting this branch recognized. And a lot of effort has been put in to have developed this, because other than pediatric surgery, this is the only other non-organ based super specialty. And when you are dealing with a non-organ based super specialty, obviously there will be too much to read and too much to learn. So just like pediatric surgery, surgical oncology is again non-organ based. A lot of effort is required to become a surgical oncologist, and to all the postgraduates, you have to keep reading, and keep doing 16, 18 hours a day for at least 3 years before you can call yourself a surgical oncologist. Thank you, everybody.